So let's read point number 4 now. Shall we read point number 4 together? Marriage ought not to be within... Oh, sorry, my mistake. We've done number 4 as well. We need to do 5 and 6 tonight. Number 5, reading together. Adultery or fornication committed after a contract being detected before marriage giveth just occasion to the innocent party to dissolve that contract. In the case of adultery after marriage, it is lawful for the innocent party to sue out a divorce, and after the divorce to marry another as if the offending party were dead. Alright, so now here we have what Westminster Confession says. Number 1, after you enter into a contract for marriage, then you discover the other party has committed fornication or adultery. Now, according to them, you can dissolve that contract. Now, actually, I'm not sure if it applies to us today. I can only think of one case that we enter into a contract. Can you think of a situation? Now, their justification is, you see point number 10, Matthew 1, 18 to 20, right? Matthew 1, 18 to 20. Shall we turn to Matthew chapter 1? We'll be looking at Matthew very often tonight. Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 20. Now, based on this situation, they say, well, if your to-be spouse commits adultery or fornication, you can dissolve the contract. Now, they quote the situation of, remember, Mary was with child from the Holy Ghost. Right? So she is a virgin. She did not commit fornication or adultery or have any sexual relationship with any man at all, but it was the virgin birth of Christ. So in that situation, but Joseph did not know at that time, Joseph as husband. Now let's read verse 19 together. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. Okay, so they cite this situation. Now, in the first place, in those days, betrothal is very different. I'm not even sure if we really have a situation of betrothal in many countries today. Maybe in certain culture they may have similar. But in those days, betrothal means from young. Right? So pretend Eugene's child, Phoebe and Elisha, from young. They say, all right, we want Phoebe to marry someone when they grow up. All right? So they betroth, the families come together. Okay, I shall not name the other name. Right? I cannot name Isaac, relatives, right? Right. We studied last week, point number 4, cannot marry close relatives. Now, so, and then as they grow up, they are actually betrothed to one another. So actually they are in that sense as good as married. In their minds, the child knows we are going to marry each other, done deal. Okay? But it is not consumed in a sense because they have not gone through the outward ceremony, and they cannot sleep together like husband and wives. No sexual relationship. But they have this concept of betrothal back then. So, well, they cite this as an example. If you enter into a contract for marriage and something like that, you discover the other person is pregnant, or the other person say, oh, I had sexual relationship with another man, then you can break that contract. Now, I kind of think of situation today, because today when you go to, for example, you enter into a contract of marriage, you go to Registrar of Marriage, right? In Perth, in many countries. Then in the civil law, you enter into a contract. You take vows, you fulfill all righteousness, you get married in the eyes of the government, correct? Then after that you have that church wedding, correct? Okay, so now the question is this. They cite this as an example that in the case of adultery, fornication, you can dissolve the contract. Maybe I'll try to apply it today. You went to ROM with your spouse-to-be, and then you take a vow, and then you got married in the eyes of the civil law. And then your spouse-to-be says, you know, I actually need to confess something to you. Hopefully the person will say, I'm pregnant. But the person say, oh, actually before you, I actually slept with another man. Or the man say, before you, I slept with another woman. Okay? I just feel very guilty now that we've registered and then I haven't told you this. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to apply the example of Joseph and Mary and take Westminster Confessions advice and say, okay, you can now dissolve the contract. Then next day make appointment with the same department and go there and say, we're getting divorced. Can you do that? Is that what we should do? All right, think about it. Now, we go further. Number 5. Now, in the case of adultery, so they cite another situation. In the case of adultery after marriage, actually in our eyes, once you get married, registered in the eyes of the law, you're considered married in the eyes of the law, all right? But as Christians, not consumed yet. So you get registered. Let me make this very clear. And parents, be very clear about this. Courting couples, be very clear about this. No matter what you do in Singapore, many people, they get registered. They typically need to get registered in the government's body. Then they can go and apply for a public housing. Understand that? Apply for public housing as a married couple to buy government's public housing. So very often, they in that sense get married first, before the church wedding. And it can be a year ahead. By the way, those from Singapore, I do not know how soon nowadays. I heard they shortened the time, is it? They shortened the time. Last time you may even have to get married, I think 1-2 years ahead. How many? 5. Up to 5 years ahead, get registered. But all this while, as long as you have not taken your vow in church before God and the ordained minister, you are not husband and wife to sleep together. Understand that. In the eyes of the law of the country, you may be. So for the Christian, not consumed. That's why we always say, you get registered, do it just before the wedding. Don't have that temptation. Get registered much earlier. So until you take the vow before God and man in the eyes of the church, witnesses and God, and the ordained ministers, make you go through the proper Christian vows. Not the world's vow, the Christian vows, not the registrar of marriage vow, the Christian vows. Because the Christian vows are based on biblical principles. You should not sleep together. Alright, so now in this case, so in our eyes, you get registered, you are married in the eyes of the law, you should not sleep together yet, but you are considered married. If you want to dissolve that, it is called divorce still. Understand that? Am I talking too fast? It's still called divorce, huh? Now, in this case, case number 2, adultery after marriage. According to Westminster Confession of Faith, now do you agree it is lawful for innocent party to sue out a divorce? Number 1, can divorce. Number 2, after the divorce, can remarry another, as if the first one is dead. Those who divorce like to say that, I wish you were dead, right? But this one didn't die, still alive. So is it right? Do you agree? Now before we ended last week, I asked, many of you say, yes, for case of fornication and divorce, you can remarry. According to Westminster Confession of Faith, here is what they say as well. So Valerie said last week, yes, can remarry. Based on fornication and adultery, can remarry. Why do you say that? Okay, you see point 11, right? They already tell you the answer. Point 11, Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 19, right? Now let's read Matthew chapter 5 first. Matthew chapter 5, now this is from Christ's mouth himself. Matthew 5 verses 31 and 32. Matthew 5, 31, 32, shall we read together? It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her, that is divorced, committeth adultery. Alright? So many cite this. Christ said this one. Right? Now, furthermore, Christ said again in Matthew 19, all right, based on our notes, Matthew 19, verse 9. Let's read Matthew 19, verse 9 together. Okay, let's read together Matthew 19, verse 9. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whosoever marrieth her which is put away committeth adultery. Now here is where Christians interpret this verse and say it is valid. Then I have to ask you. So try to use colors, alright? Man blue, right? Alright, man. Lady red or pink. Lady, alright? Man, lady, married, or had a contract, and then divorce. Now, so the interpretation is divorce is permitted. In fact, Christ said you can divorce in the case of adultery, committing adultery, or committing, fornication. Fornication, correct? This case. Now, and what did he say after that? He says, no, actually I ask you this. So you agree? Agree, right? Now, read the verse carefully. Because I ask you, question number 1. Do you agree with 24.5 regarding divorce? So many of you agree. Do you agree that Matthew 1, Matthew 5, Matthew 19, cited, encourage and approve divorce on the grounds of adultery? You all agree. Who do not believe that even for adultery and fornication, you should not divorce? Who says, yeah, you should not divorce? Anyone? Wow, so many. Well, okay, Valerie changed her mind. She read carefully this week. Why suddenly you change your mind?
I was the sentence is not finished last week. I said he can divorce, but ideally God says you stay together and reconcile.
Alright, he can divorce, but ideally you stay together, you reconcile. That one we discuss later. Alright, we discuss later. Now I'm simply asking one very straightforward question. Adultery and fornication, is Christ giving the basis, the grounds, the approval? Yeah, we all will study later. Christ don't want divorce. But is he saying, yes, this is ground of reasons for divorce? Okay, Yong, you say no. Why? Is it grounds for divorce? Not ideal, but is it a ground for divorce?
I don't think it should be.
You don't think it should be, but why? Okay, let's all stare at the verse, Matthew 19. Matthew, let's stare at this passage. Matthew 19. Okay, Sherlyn, you also say no. You also say that Matthew 19 verse 9, Christ is not giving the grounds that fornication is grounds for divorce. Why do you say no? I'm not saying good or not good. I'm just saying, is Christ saying this is legitimate ground for it?
I was saying no because of the same reason.
Oh, so it's ideal not to. But so you're still, okay, who said Christ is not saying that just now? Put up your hands. No, now no one really suddenly. All right, Ben. Ben, why do you say that Christ... So Ben, is Christ saying this is legitimate ground? Not say ideal or not ideal, just is it legitimate grounds?
Maybe based on the context of why he actually said that.
Oh, very smart, all right? So always we look at context. So you say based on context, you say Christ is not saying this fornication and adultery is not legitimate grounds for divorce. You say that. So you disagree with everyone in the church. Okay, so you have to tell your context. What's the context?
Because in verse 3, the Pharisees were trying to tempt him.
Okay, verse 3, the Pharisees trying to tempt him. Go ahead.
And then they say, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?
Okay. Yep, and then?
And then Christ said that what God has put together no man, let no man put asunder.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be one flesh already.
Supposed to be one flesh, yes. We understand so far?
Then after that, that's when and then they brought up about why did Moses say that you can have a pass a bill of divorcement.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Christ gave the, say not for every cause, but an option.
So now you also go back to everyone, not for every cause except this one. So most Christians always say that based on these verses, Christ gave legitimate reasons. In the case of fornication and adultery, it is legitimate reason for divorce. Correct? Most Christians say that, and WCF say that. Now, I totally disagree. And many Christians disagree. So it's not just me, right? It's not me against the world, and even if it is, I will stick to my ground. Now, please look at verse 9. Let me ask you, what word is repeated? Okay, we stick with Ben. Ben, what phrase is repeated? What phrase?
Which phrase? Verse 9.
Verse 9. Which one? What is Christ emphasizing? He keeps talking about one thing. He is thinking and talking about one thing. Very good. Now this word, this phrase is, this is the topic that Christ is on. Understand? The topic that Christ is on is committing adultery. Adultery or committing adultery or fornication. Correct? What is the topic Christ is explaining to them? About committing adultery or fornication. Okay? Now, listen carefully. First and foremost, you look at verse 4. 4 and 5. 4 and 5, Christ emphasized the sanctity of marriage. Understand that? Christ said that this is something that God ordained, and they are one flesh, and they are joined together, and never let any man put these persons asunder. Correct? In other words, Christ is lifting up the original intent of the institution of marriage when God instituted it. Understand? The people have always had this concept, for this case can divorce, for that case can divorce, for this case can divorce. Then they said, then why Moses allow people to divorce? Then God said, it's for the hardness of your heart. Correct? You, because of the hardness of your heart, God allowed, look at verse 8. Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, you made so many excuses for divorce. And when Moses don't let you, what happened to the wives? They were very badly abused. All right? Physically, emotionally. So, God, to protect the women, or maybe even men, allowed because of the hardness of their heart. Their heart was so hard. God said no divorce. They keep making up excuses. When they don't get their way, they make the lives very difficult for the spouse. And what did God say? What did Christ say? Christ said, verse 8, it is, but from the beginning it was not so. Understand that? Now, first Christ took one very big step to Genesis. He said, divorce, God made you one flesh. Divorce was never meant to be. Okay? Huh? Now, listen carefully. Christ just made the statement saying that divorce was never meant to be. Christ said, let no man put asunder. Means even if in the case of adultery and fornication, a third party should not be the case. Now, I prove to you, verse 9. How should we interpret this? Verse 9. Then I say unto you. Now, I need to tell you something about your thinking about a particular thing regarding marriage. Was he dealing with divorce now? He changed the topic to, he repeated this, fornication. Understand? He's talking about fornication. Now, listen carefully what Christ said. Don't put mouth into Christ's word. All right? Don't put words into Christ's mouth, and the other way as well. Now, he says this, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whosoever marry her, that is put away, commit adultery. Now, listen and watch. If a man divorced a wife and marry another woman, what did Christ say? If you divorce, you put away your wife, and you, great, no more wife. Now I go marry another. What have you just done? Committed adultery. Okay? And what did God say? And anyone who marry the woman who is put away, what? Committed adultery also. In fact, if the husband will cause the wife to commit adultery by putting her away, and she end up marrying another one, you cause her to commit adultery. Understand that? It's Friday, you're listening. All right. So, he's saying this. Now, I want you to understand something. You all always think that only when you are married and you commit fornication, then that is considered adultery. I repeat, The people at that time, their thinking has always been, what is adultery? They always had the wrong idea. Christ had to correct them. You look at a woman and lust is adultery. Now here he has to correct in the marriage situation. Many think that adultery is simply when we are married, then we had extramarital affair, then it's considered adultery. Understand? Christ said, I need to correct you. I need to change your understanding about adultery. I've already taught you all, if you lust after a woman, that's considered adultery. Please don't think that if I don't want to commit adultery, but I want to marry another woman, the way around it is to get rid of the wife, then I can marry another woman. That's not considered adultery. And that's not considered fornication. Do you understand? Okay, some still blank. I use name. I use name. Okay, I use my own name so that I don't embarrass anyone. Say I'm very wicked. I like someone else, all right? I don't mention name also. Any name that don't exist here, not? Wendy, okay? No Wendy, right? No Wendy in church, huh? I like Wendy. Then I think that if I divorce Sharon, and then I marry Wendy, and then I've not committed adultery. That's my way out of having a legitimate marriage with Wendy now, and not considered fornication, not considered adultery, because I've divorced Sharon. Understand that? Now the men used to think like that at that time. The way around this is get rid of the wife, divorce, and then I've not committed adultery. I've not committed fornication. Christ is saying this. Now with that understanding, read this carefully. Verse 9. And I say to you, don't think that you put away your wife. Now I need to tell you, except for fornication. Christ is saying this. I don't have, except for fornication, I'm putting aside the case of fornication. Because if you committed fornication in marriage, you already committed adultery, right? When it's except for, you have to understand it. Except for means Christ is saying, I'm putting aside the case of fornication because you all know, you all always knew that in the case of fornication, in marriage, is considered adultery. I say again, Christ is saying, now I need to correct your thinking. And I don't have to mention fornication in marriage. Because in the case, if you're married and you commit fornication, you know that there's adultery. So I'm putting that aside. So when it says except for fornication, now let me continue first. Verse 9. Stare at verse 9. Now, and his emphasis is, please don't think that you put away your wife. Now, I don't have to mention the case of fornication, right? Don't think that you have not committed adultery if you marry another woman. And don't think that she has not committed adultery when she marries another woman, just because of divorce. Okay, I know it's Friday night. Christ is saying this. I'm telling you, in the case of fornication, I don't have to mention, it's adultery already. But please remember, if you put away your wife and marry another person, it's also fornication and adultery. I don't have to mention this case. If your wife marry another person outside, although she's been divorced, it's also adultery. Of course, if it's case of fornication, it's adultery, right? Clear as mud? Because if Christ said otherwise, he is contradicting himself. He just said in verse 8, from the beginning it was not so. He said in verse 6, what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. He said, don't you dare, what God hath put together, and you take your vow before God, don't you dare think that you can put away your wife and marry another and think you have not committed adultery and broken God's original intent. Understand? Yes. So, yeah.
If one of the spouse committed adultery and they divorced but they remain not married after that,
is that okay? So the question is this. If these two persons divorce, all right, they divorce, but they remain single, is it okay? What is okay? Okay to remain single or okay to remain divorced?
Is divorce permissible in that case?
Is it permissible? So I say, okay, so this is another interpretation. If I divorce my wife, but I have no intention to remarry, and also make sure she don't remarry, I don't know how, is that okay to get divorced then? Because Christ is saying, now don't think that you divorce and then you remarry, that's not adultery, that's still adultery. Okay, so I divorce, but I don't intend to get remarried. Is that permissible? The answer is found in verse 8. Verse 7, verse 5. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. Means you, as a husband or the wife, is included in that, let not man put asunder. You're included in that. So, let not man put asunder means you yourself cannot divorce her or him. Understand? So, verse 6 is very clear. God says that no man, including yourself, should initiate divorce. Okay? So divorce, Christ just said there is no permissible situation. And verse 8, from the beginning, it has always been no permissible situation. Understand? And therefore, he wants to correct their thinking in verse 9. There is never a permissible situation, not even fornication. And in fact, for the fornication case, I don't have to mention it. I'm putting it aside. Because you have been thinking the case of, I put it aside, I marry another, I've not committed fornication because I've divorced her already. Okay? So Christ upholds marriage very, very highly. He says, verse 6, let no man put asunder. Verse 8 is from the beginning it has been like that. Yes, Benedict.
Verse 9 is saying so there's a married couple and no one has committed fornication, and then someone wants to be someone else, so they're asking me if I divorce, and then Christ is saying, can you marry another? No one, and that is for the goal.
Okay, sorry, slow down. Okay. If, so that I can repeat the question, if?
So verse 9 is saying there's a married couple and no one has committed fornication.
Married couple, no one has committed fornication.
And then just say, for example, the guy wants to be with someone else. So they're asking...
The guy wants to be someone else?
They're asking, can I divorce my wife and then marry that person, and is it okay? And Christ saying, no, that is adultery.
And so someone likes a man likes another person, has not committed fornication, and goes and asks, requests the priest, can I divorce my wife because I want to marry another? And Christ is telling him, you cannot because that is called fornication and adultery. You are exactly correct.
But my question is, what if there was a husband and a wife, and the wife actually slept with another man? Can this husband divorce her legitimately?
If husband and wife and the wife slept with another man, can they divorce? Can the man divorce her? We'll answer afterwards, okay? But I want to emphasize at this part, verses 5, 6, and 8. Christ made a very simple point. From the beginning, divorce has never been God's intent in marriage. Never. Full stop. And don't come up with any ideas about it. Right? Even fornication. Fornication, I'm putting it aside. Fornication, I know is adultery, Christ said. You all know it's adultery. I don't have to deal with fornication. But you are thinking of this sneaky thing. And I want to tell you this sneaky thing that you've been thinking about, and I don't have to mention fornication because it's an obvious case of adultery. The sneaky thing that you're thinking about, please know, God forbade that also, and God considers that adultery and fornication. Clear? Okay. So please understand this verse rightly. It is not a basis for, that Christ is giving basis and an exception for divorce. Christ just said from the beginning, it was never so. Okay? God never contradicts his own commandments. Yes?
Pastor, from a practicality point of view, when the spouse committed adultery, it's very hard for the husband and wife to be together.
For a practical point of view, husband and wife, if a spouse commits adultery, isn't it very difficult for them to live together? The answer is yes. But the point is, still no divorce. We'll see more afterwards. Huh? Can they live separately? Okay, we'll answer it afterwards. So, can you please ask me again afterwards? Okay, it's in the question here. I sat down and think of all the questions that you might ask. All right, because I know there are a lot of misunderstanding about this and a lot of questions. Now, first, clear. Is it very clear? Matthew, Mark, all these verses, Christ is saying, fornication, I don't even have to mention it, it's called adultery. But don't think that you put away your wife and marry someone else, that's not adultery. That's still adultery. Yes, Vincent?
I don't get it, like, except in the, can you elaborate?
He said, now, except for the case of fornication, okay, start. God's topic is committing adultery or fornication. That is his topic in his mind. He repeated it. He's dealing with what is adultery and fornication. Vincent, listen carefully. Christ is dealing with what is fornication and adultery. Okay? So when he said, except it be for fornication, fornication, I don't have to mention it already. Fornication is adultery and fornication. So I don't have to mention this case. You already know. But I want to deal with the case where you intend to put away your wife when there is no fornication or adultery in the marriage. You want to put her away and you want to marry someone. Don't think that when you do that, it's not adultery or fornication. Clear? Okay. All right, now. Okay, we're going to move quickly. Next. Now, what is Actually, Okay, I'll come back after this. Now, what is definitely a legitimate reason for someone to remarry? What is it? Say again? Death. Okay, death. How do we know? Look, your notes there give you Romans chapter 7. Romans chapter 7. Let's turn to Romans chapter 7. All right, make it clear. Any other case, adultery. Actually, let me ask you before we go further. Now, please remember, this is the definition of God. Don't try and argue and ask why. God simply says, as long as you divorce and you remarry, it's fornication and adultery. Okay? That is it. Now, but in the case of death, Romans chapter 7, verse 2 to 3. Chapter 7. So here is a very, very clear case. Now here is simple. All right, let's read together verse 2 and 3. For the woman which hath an husband is bound by law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. And then if while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband is dead, or be dead, she is free from the law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Is this consistent with what Christ said? It is. Okay, it's consistent. That's why even for the case of fornication, you divorce, it is still considered adultery. I repeat. The definition that God used Paul to reiterate what Christ said is, whatever case, fornication definitely a case of adultery. Whatever case, as long as you divorce and your spouse is not dead and you remarry, you are called an adulteress or an adulterer. Ken? I didn't make this up, you read it for yourself. Yes, Rowena.
I don't know if I'm just reading WCF wrong, but like when you read WCF, it sounds like they're saying you can divorce.
That is, thank you for bringing it up. All right, so Rowena's question is, I'm not sure if I'm reading WCF wrong, but WCF seems to be saying that they can. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. That is why I say I disagree with WCF. Chapter 24, point number 5, I disagree. Because it's so clear in scriptures. Now, we are not blind followers. WCF is not the Bible. All right? We, in any conflict in faith and practice, go back to what? The Bible, right? So when we read the Bible very simply, it is wrong. So we disagree. Okay? Now, so it is wrong to say you enter a contract, oh, got adultery, I break up. I divorce. Or you found out after marriage, I divorce. And marry another as if the person is dead. That's what they say, right? The person is not dead. You may wish the person is dead and you treat the person as dead, but the person is not dead. As long as the person is not dead, you're called an what? adulteress or adulterer. That's the definition of the Bible, not my definition. So clear up that in your mind. Now I tell you that when the people heard this, you know what they say? Please, sorry I forgot. Please turn back to Matthew chapter 19. You know what the people understood what Christ was saying, not like us. We have this funny idea. Maybe in Greek it's more strict, more easy to understand. Now, you know what the people say when Christ said, wow, as long as you divorce, full stop, it's adultery. Even if it's for fornication, full stop, it is adultery if you divorce. Okay? You know what the people say after that? Can we read verse 10 together? Now we are all present together. We are the disciples there. Let's read verse 10. And his disciples say unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. Do you get it? They were thinking, and Christ pierced through their heart and exposed all their thoughts. All these men down there, let's try and catch him. Or, wow, I want to marry her, you know. I divorce, then it's not adultery, right? Then Christ said, I know your heart. It is adultery. Except for fornication, don't have to mention. I know you won't mention fornication and adultery to me. But you're thinking this is not adultery, right? This is adultery. Then what did they say? The people say, wow, like that. Better don't get married. Too late if they're married. You see, they understood what Christ was saying. If it's a case of fornication, they say, well, still got way out. They say, wow, you know, no horse run, bo bei zao. Well, that's now this idiom. I often use it wrongly. So I can't, no matter where I turn, it's adultery. They say, wow, not good to get married. Yes, Benedict.
The people, I'm not sure who the people are that are asking the question in that part, but they're trying to be tricky. But if we're genuinely asking, like, if somebody's spouse has been unfaithful to them, can the innocent party divorce them and can they remarry? That's still not being addressed yet.
That is addressed in question number 3. All right? We answer question number 3. But we answer question number 2 first. All right? About if a spouse commit adultery, is it okay for the innocent party to remarry? Actually, I ask you now, Howard. Benedict's question is, in the case of fornication, does it mean that it is okay?
I think as you mentioned, God doesn't allow divorce, but because of the hardness of the man's heart, people want to see them. I think the Old Testament there was the case that all the prophets was asked to give the wife, the wife to give the
Okay, so I think I know what you're saying. You're saying that it's not good, but God allowed, right? It's not good, but allowed, right? Benedict, you hold a question. I answer in question number 3. Okay? Now, so legitimate, very clear. Look at Romans. Please read and know this verse very well. Only one situation you are not called an adulteress is death. Let me ask you why. Colin, why? Why death? You write death certificate in the hospital. Oh, okay. Wife, madam, you want to get married? You can remarry. Why? The vow till death. Oh, because you vow. I vow till death do us part. Oh, you're dead. My vow is over. That is one correct point. Yes, that's correct. But why else?
The verse, if it's dead, the person they can't sanctify the wife.
Okay. Because how should the husband love the wife? You must love her in a sanctifying way, right? So since you're dead, I can't sanctify her already, so I can remarry. Well, you can sanctify physically. Every time, make sure you go there and keep the body well. Now, I'm joking with you. You're correct. Now, number 1 is your duties. You can't fulfill your duties to them anymore. Okay? But most importantly, God said, let no man put asunder. Pay. Let no man put asunder. Means what? Very good. God said no man can. The only time when the marriage can be annulled is when I annul it. Because I am the one who brought you together. You took the vow of human, I put you together. What God has put together, right? I put you together. The only person that can separate you is me. Not any situation, not anyone. And how does God separate you, Benedict? Death. Who is who has the power to cause someone to die? God. All right, so very clear. Okay, thus far, absolutely clear. God says no situation. Every situation is called adultery. That's why the people say, oh, I don't want to get married already. Now, what would you advise? All right, so someone's husband passed away in church and come to you. All right, say come to Leah. All right, come to Leah, and Leah, you know, my husband passed away already. And then we study in WCF, this is grounds to get married. Can I get married, Leah? Then Leah says, based on Romans chapter 7, you can. Then she asks Leah another question. She says, Leah, do you think I should get married? I really want to get married, you know. And I like Uncle so-and-so in that church. What would your advice be? Now, there are people who, when someone's husband dies or someone's wife dies, they suddenly become very busy matchmaker. You understand? No? Should we do that? We do that. All right. So, Leah, what would you advise? Leah very smart. Always ask husband. Okay. So valid, because the Bible says if you don't know anything in church, ask your husband. So ask Deacon Eugene. So.
I think you should intentionally go and
You should intentionally. You should not intentionally. Why? Very lonely, you know.
Same reason like you shouldn't for singles also.
Same reason for singles should not keep looking to get married. Now actually there are proper biblical verses. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Okay, I'm still moving too slow. I got this to be really fast. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Now, okay, can we read verse 39 and 40 together? Reading together. The wife is bound by law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. But she is happier if she so abide. After my judgment, and I think so also that I have the Spirit of God. Now, what did Paul say? Same thing again. As long as your husband is alive, as long as your spouse is alive, you are bound. Fornication or adultery does not break that bond. Understand? Can I repeat? You have read over and over again, fornication and adultery does not break the marriage bond, neither is it basis for divorce. Only the case of marriage, death, then the marriage bond is dissolved. So Paul reiterates here, but he says, if you want to get married, can, but marry Christians, right, in the Lord. Then in verse 40, but she is happier if she so abide. And is it Paul suka say? Yeah, Paul feel like saying, after my judgment, and I think also that I have the Spirit of God. He knows that he's writing under inspiration of God. And he said, for the case where the spouse died, you can remarry, you can. But only Christians, condition number 1. But God in his word says, don't be going around trying to get remarried again. Alright? And don't be the kepo. Is it some kulok po? What is that? What's the meaning? I don't know. Is it a bad thing? Sorry. Alright. Don't be the matchmaker. Go around, you know, put a mole on your mouth and go around and then keep matchmaking. God says don't. She is happier. Because marriage is not easy, right? After we study more of this. So there is no need for a Christian to think that after my spouse died, I better go and find a husband. Or a Christian friend to say, so poor thing, alone at home every day. Alright? I better bring a man to her or a woman to her from church. No need. Okay? Clear? Alright? So don't do that. But no need to do that. She's happier. But if you want to remarry, can. Only Christians. Alright, now point number 3. Now we come to all the questions you have. What should I do in my marriage? In your marriage? Okay? If this happened in your marriage, you better be clear. Or another Christian from another church asks you for advice. Case number 1, 3A. You discover that the spouse to be has committed fornication with another before marriage. We still at point 5, right? Before marriage. Okay, so or even not married people, single. All right, Rowena, your colleague who's a Christian at work comes to you, getting married. and he said, Rowena, you know, I just found out that my boyfriend, we've got engaged, we're going to get married. My boyfriend just confessed that he used to have another girlfriend and they've committed fornication before. And he just told me. He just dropped the bomb on me. What advice would you give? Or two persons in courtship. And then the girl comes to you. You know, I think I need to be honest with you. I committed fornication before. How? What do you want to do? Right? So, Rowena, what would you advise?
Did they commit fornication before they were saved?
Okay, first question just, is it before fornication, before saved? Then say after salvation. But the church did not teach me, I didn't know, and I was very foolish. Now after I learned, I know it was a sin.
I don't know, I think if you know better, then you should do better. So if they didn't know better, then they don't know. So then maybe they did it out of ignorance. But I would still caution the friend and say that, you know, this just shows his character, and you have to know if this is what he's doing before marriage. You have to be sure that he's changed.
Alright, so check his character. Well, maybe last time he did this out of foolishness, but check whether he has really changed. Alright, then she asks you still, do you think I should go ahead and get married? You just reminded me, right? Point number 5, we don't agree. If you enter into agreement and you say you can break up.
I probably recommend them not to.
You recommend them not to. It's not your decision, but you recommend them not to. Sujin, what would you say? Yes, Sujin's here, right? Alright? A Christian brother comes and says, you know, we got engaged, we announced in church already. Should I continue?
It would probably be wise to wait for a season to continue to observe before committing to any decision.
Observe what? It's wiser to wait for a season to observe. Observe what?
Observe the character and also if the person has actually repented.
Observe the character whether the person has truly repented. Now, this is before marriage. Okay, this is before marriage. Boyfriend, girlfriend. Okay? Now, when you're boyfriend and girlfriend, there's no divorce to start with, right? If you break up, it's called breakup. It's not called divorce, correct? Now, then it's the person's choice. But if the people have gone to registrar of marriage, you must know it's called divorce. You should never advise to break up. Okay? You should never advise to break up because they are married in the eyes of the law also. So, for boyfriend and girlfriend, yeah, I think all these advice are sound. You observe for a while. Now, the very important thing is, can you accept it? Right? If you think you cannot accept it, you cannot forgive him, it will be something that will plague you for the rest of your life. I can tahan a lot of things. I can tahan, he don't bathe before he sleep, he don't brush his teeth before he sleep. I can tahan a lot of things. But when it comes to this sort of thing, even though he say, I've changed, I've repented, I cannot take it. Then better don't get married. Right? So you have to ask yourself, can you wait a while? Maybe now you're very excited, you bought your gown, all of that, very excited. In the rush, you're never mind, I can forgive you. Never mind, all is fine. But I say maybe it's good, take some time. Maybe after a few months you think about it again. It's something you can't live with. You think about that. Alright? But it is always good to advise what? Learn to forgive. Correct? Even as Christ, even God forgive us for the sake of Christ. Correct? Now we ask the second question, which is Benedict's repeated question. So now in the case of adultery after marriage, what would you advise? Or it happened in your marriage, what will you do? So Benedict's question is here. Look here. Man and wife found out, man or woman finds out husband committed adultery in marriage. What should you advise the husband? Or if you're what should you advise the wife? Or if you are the wife? Okay, let's ask. Phyllis. They said, I want to divorce her because my husband committed adultery. And Matthew 19 says, except for fornication. So you can explain Matthew 19 already, right? But, so how you explain? Actually, Benedict, you try to answer this yourself. In the case of adultery, We read many verses. Can you still divorce? Adultery in marriage. Okay, who want to answer? Okay.
I think it's a choice if the other party wants to live together as long as they don't have children. Let's say if she wants to live, even if it comes to adultery, I think the marriage can still work. And let's say then they're going to grow the children. If one party commit adultery, it's still very difficult because the children are involved.
So if they have children, it's very difficult. So if children, you advise not to divorce. If don't have children?
Even if they don't have children, if one offended, the innocent party still desire to marriage, I think that it can be possible.
Okay, so the wife, so the husband commit adultery, have children, very difficult. But actually have children, no children, the law is still the same, all right? No children, as long as the husband say, please forgive me, I repent, I want to change, I want to stay married. That's very easy, of course, stay married, right? But what Benedict's question is, the wife cannot take it. No children also, all right? Got children also cannot take it. No children also cannot take it. The wife say, I want to divorce him. Valerie, what would you say? She's a Christian.
Was Matthew 19 verse 6 saying, let no man put asunder, so that means that
divorce is absolutely not an option. Let no man put asunder, and it has been so since the beginning. God is saying from the beginning, divorce is absolutely not part of God's design, and therefore it's not an option for Christian. Understand that? Absolutely, whatever case, fornication, adultery, robbery, anything, no grounds at all. No grounds at all. So Benedict, God simply says there is no ground for divorce except what? Death. Death, God conducts the divorce. Death ends. God ends the marriage by taking one life away. Other than that, in the Christian world, it's very simple. No divorce at all. For what reason? Yes, Howard.
So how about the wife that committed fornication but a child?
Okay. That's why I say this chapter never ends, I didn't think of that question. All right, wife commit adultery, have child. Actually it's so simple the answer. Wife commit adultery with another man, okay, another Xiu Yan. All right, commit another man, and then have a child. So is it grounds for divorce? Okay, Howard and you are discussing Phyllis at home. How? So what would you say, Phyllis? Both of you lie in bed. How? What should we advise? The person, the friend. Don't know. Actually, very simple. It goes back to one simple principle. Matthew, in the book of Matthew, what God put together, let no man put asunder, means divorce is absolutely never part of God's option. It has been so in the beginning. Okay? Right from the beginning, no divorce. So have baby, have twins, have pet together, buy the same dog together. No grounds of divorce, full stop. Don't need to think. Yes?
isn't it if the woman was pregnant with someone else, if they still live together, isn't they are committing adultery again?
Okay. All right. So the question is this. So she slept with another man, then she come back, have baby, and she repent and sleep with the husband. Is the husband committing adultery with her? No, because that is the original bond. In fact, if they divorce, then she marries another man, she commits adultery. As long as in a marriage, it's never called adultery. Even if your spouse commits adultery with someone, you don't divorce. She comes back or he comes back, what you have together is never considered adultery because God never wants you to get divorced in the first place. In the marriage, it's never adultery. Okay? It's just a lot of sin committed. Now, let's go quickly. Now, how do we know? Because of Matthew chapter 19. We already saw that. Matthew chapter 19 the few verses. Okay? So you, make sure I give it to you. Now, until this point, I just want us to change our thinking very clearly. Look at Matthew chapter 19. God says they become one flesh. Do you know what is one flesh? One flesh means you are soldered together as one. The only one that can break this one flesh is called God. Okay? As long as your spouse did not die, God intends you all to be together. Whether there's adultery, there's fornication, there is whatever, God intends you all to be together. Yes?
What about cases of domestic violence where...
Domestic violence is answered, if we ever get there, all right, is answered in question number 7b. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, so I established this point first. You must be clear. God in the Bible never gives reason. He always says, no man put asunder unless he is the one. Now, so what should you do? What will you advise? The wife said, every time I see the man, I cannot take it. Or this case, you put extreme case. Every time, now this man ran away. All right, 小人 he ran away, and then the wife with the baby now. And the wife said, I want to keep the baby. Of course, all right, keep the baby. Then the husband said, wow, I another one to my house. And every time I see this baby, this little, I get so angry. Pastor, I cannot take it. I think I really need to divorce. But pastor will say what? Please no. In Matthew chapter 19, God says divorce is not an option at all. People keep coming up with all sorts of excuses. Christ put them in place and then say, wow, better don't get married. Right? Because they understood there's no option. There's no option. Everything is called adultery if you divorce. Unless your husband dies. Your husband dies, you remarry, not called adultery. Okay? So the wife said, I really cannot take it. No, Pastor, you don't know every day what I live with. I see the little, and then I see the man. What are you going to answer? Moray? Your pilot trainees tell you that. Your pilot, I carry on like that, I'm going to drive the aeroplane into the sea.
Actually, this is what if
What, you asked me back a question. Okay, what if what?
If the one committed adultery and then never repent, and then still according to the Bible, still don't allow them to...
If the wife commit adultery and she won't repent, and? She won't repent and then?
She never repent, and then there's a lot of hatred between each other, and that is like any mercy to the family. Mercy. So mercy, like you... Okay. You know what's the problem with thinking? If the person, they cannot take it, all right? They have lots of trouble. Lots of trouble. So because of lots of trouble, which is in question number 6, all right? Point number 6. Willful desertion cannot be remedied by church or the law. You know, the world call it what? In divorce terms, there's a very, very well-known term. Colin, what is the term called? The most common cited reason. Irreconcilable differences. ID. Irreconcilable differences means there is no way to reconcile. All right? It's just so much problem. I see the person, I want to explode. Right? Irreconcilable difference. So because irreconcilable differences, let's allow divorce. Eugene, do you think it's right? Same as the hardness of the heart. Correct. You see, Christ say the problem is we put the marriage bond below what we feel and what we like. But if you put the marriage bond above everything else, as Christ just explained to them, the sanctity of it, not to be broken, right? If you put this above, then this, you say, no matter what, I am going to solve this. Understand that? Okay, yes. Wait, let me make a point first before I forget. I always forget. Now, okay. Difficulties. Trouble. And I need to get a degree. Parents can relate with that. I need to get a degree. Education degree. I need to get an education degree. If you put this first, if it's difficult, I think I don't study. But if you put this first, my aim is to get to graduate. No matter what difficulty I face, I will face it and I will solve it. I will ask people to teach me. I will stay up at night. I will work hard. You won't throw up your hand as too difficult, too difficult, too difficult. Right? Because you put this as very clear, non-negotiable, not touchable. Parents just paid, how much? I don't know, the parents paid $80,000. $80,000 for me to come to Australia to get my degree. Failing is not an option. Many of us even give up church. Failing is not an option. You will stay up, you will burn midnight oil, you will do whatever it takes to make sure you achieve it. Because it's a not passing is not an option, right? Because we put marriage, that's why Christ was trying to correct them. From the beginning, this is supposed to be up here. But the hardness of your heart is, we want divorce, cannot handle, we want divorce, cannot handle, right? That is a problem. So we must, now first of all, there is the principle. Can you please turn to Matthew chapter 18? Matthew chapter 18. Before Christ talked about this divorce case, Matthew chapter 18. Now, how often are you supposed to forgive someone? 22, Matthew 18:22, let's read together. I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7 means keep forgiving, right? And what is the basis for us? Even the wife is unrepentant, and it's very, very difficult. Now, when it is very difficult, how can you make it easier to forgive? Turn to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, can we read verse 32 together? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, reading together. And be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake have forgiven you. When you cannot forgive, what do? For Christ's sake, God forgave me. Christ died for me, then for Christ's sake, I also forgive others, right? That is a Christian principle. It is not, I cannot handle this anymore, I want divorce. It is go to scriptures, I am supposed to forgive. When Israel kept committing adultery, God purposely asked the prophet to marry an adulterous woman, right? For what purpose? To teach this reason, to teach them. You see how they will see with their own eyes, wow, this prophet, how can this prophet tahan? This wife keeps running away, commit fornication, have other children. How can this prophet tahan? Then they remember themselves. We are like that. We committing idolatrous adultery against Jehovah. And now we see with our own eyes, this prophet, God used this prophet to teach us the lesson. He keeps forgiving us. He still never divorced us. Is Israel permanently put aside? Huh? We keep studying, right? Israel is never put aside. Did God put Israel aside permanently? No, he said, you're my spouse. Until the end, you will still be my spouse, right? That's why we understand that. So by Israel permanently being God's bride. Yes.
Yeah, how about two unbelievers after the marriage?
Not yet. Unbelievers after. Next. Okay.
What if the innocent party wants to stay in a marriage, but the other party wants to divorce and they have children and the other party can be violent?
Okay. What happened if the innocent party, say the woman, right? The innocent party don't want to divorce, but the man wants to divorce. Now the offending party wants to divorce. And they have children, and if don't divorce, he will be violent towards the children and the wife. Okay? What happens in those situations? We cover in 7b. Okay? We cover that. Now, so please remember, can we press reset button once and for all? Matthew 19, Christ is saying, no grounds. That's why the people say, wow, don't want to get married. So single, you still want to get married? Christ they say, wow, better don't get married already. So no grounds, full stop. Fix the problem, forgive if you cannot forgive. Every time you see the child, you see the wife, you get very, very angry. You say, for Christ has forgiven me. I commit worse things against Christ, right? Let me ask you today, do you still commit sin? Who say, I don't sin anymore? After I know Christ died for me, make me his child, I don't sin anymore. We still sin, right? Did Christ say, when you sin, sorry, goodbye, no more out of the house? The church, you think the church is perfect? The church continued to sin against God on earth, right? Did God say, I'm going to forget you, divorce you? No, Christ said, I will come back for my bride, correct? So with all that, then the principle is forgiveness. And the spouse, if you are a Christian, the spouse must realize this, divorce is not an option. I must repent, I must change, I must mend this relationship. Not keep thinking about divorce. Okay? Yes?
And as a church, if we see, let's say, other people coming in, who want divorce and get married again, so how should we look at it?
Okay, so sometimes in church, when they're not taught, you see, this couple get divorced, marry another person in church, and all these things happening in church. That's a problem because not taught. Now, how should we look at them, is it?
I always thought that they said new people coming into church.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have to look at them with colored eyes? Or
New people coming to church, do we look at them at colored eyes? We never look at them with colored eyes. We always try to help them understand from scriptures what they should be. All right? So why are we learning all this? Why spend so much time in detail? Why are singles even listening in? Because you're right, there are going to be people who divorce as Christians and they come to our church. How are you going to help them? If you do not all know all this, you can't help them. If they say we want to divorce, you can't show them scriptures. You can't explain to them. And they say, no, irreconcilable differences. You can't show them scriptures to say, no, divorce is not an option. You must remember Christ forgave you. And Christ is still forgiving you every day when you sin against him. How can you say then, I keep sinning against Christ, I ask him to forgive me, I expect Christ to forgive me, but my wife, I will never forgive her. Or my husband, I'll never forgive her. You cannot be like that, right? So everyone can help them understand. Then they begin to think, oh, now I understand. Divorce is not an option. It was never an option. Now I need to focus on forgiveness and be kind, be loving, and fix the marriage problems, rather than keep thinking of divorce as an option. When divorce is not an option, you fix the problem. Understand that? You say, I want to live like that for the rest of my life. I'll fix it. Correct? Okay? Yes, Benedict.
Sort of but just using an example, so I have a friend that has, the mum has a new husband. I don't know the background that well, but the parents are basically unbelievers. So if you ever brought the mom to church who's an unbeliever with her stepdad, how should we treat them? Is it kind of like how you were talking about if your child marries an unbeliever and after that, what you should do from that time on? Because the sin is already.
Yes. Unbelievers or even believers, they have marriage, divorce and all that. When they come to our church, we treat them like any other Christian. We over time help them to understand scriptures. Then slowly their marriage will get right because they understand scriptures. At that point they do not know. They do not understand.
At that time, because she's married for the second time, and if she becomes a believer, does it still count as an adulterous relationship?
Okay, so she's an unbeliever. She got married the second time, then she became a believer. Covered in 7, all right? Okay, good questions, but they're all covered in scriptures. Scriptures have all the answers here. All right, so please remember, husband, wives, never even think of divorce, even if your spouse commit adultery. Let me ask you, have you committed adultery against Christ? Plenty of time, every day still. How do you pray? Forgive us of our trespasses as we don't forgive our spouses. Forgive us our trespasses as we don't forgive our spouses. Rhymes, right? No, you must forgive. Forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That is the prayer. All right, so forgiveness is the answer. Now, proof to you. Okay, 26. Okay, point 6. Let's do point 6. Then we cover those. Point 6. Let's read together. Although the corruption of men be such as apt to study arguments unduly to put asunder those whom God had joined together in marriage, yet nothing but adultery or such willful desertion as can no way be remedied by the church or civil magistrate is cause sufficient for dissolving the bond of marriage. wherein a public and orderly discourse or proceeding is to be observed, and the persons concerned in it not be left to their own wills and discretion in their own course. I explain to you what they mean, and I ask you whether you agree. Look at point 6. He say, now, at the beginning he said, yeah, men are very corrupted, right? Just like in Matthew 19. Men are very corrupted. They will always study arguments. They will always come up with arguments why they should get divorced. Irreconcilable differences. Men are very good in coming up with arguments to put aside what God has joined together in marriage. Then they say, but remember, you come up with all excuses, nothing but adultery. So they say adultery can have divorce. Do you agree? We settled already. That is not what Christ meant. So we don't agree. But now they bring in another point. Willful desertion. Willful desertion means the person say, I want to divorce you. Or I don't care about, I'm still married to you, but I don't care about the family. I treat you all like non-existent, and I keep going on with my girlfriend or boyfriend outside. Now, in these kind of cases, then the church step in. The church also cannot help. Civil magistrate, government step in. They also cannot help. Then it is sufficient grounds for dissolving the bond of marriage. Do you agree? Do you agree? We cannot agree. Because Christ said in Matthew 19, there are simply no grounds. Because of the hardness of your heart. They are simply saying this. Because men are very good at thinking of reasons. And if the reason is willful desertion, don't care about the family, there is a reason to be dissolved, then what Christ said is wrong. Christ said no grounds, right? No grounds. So we cannot agree with irreconcilable differences. Let me ask again, Fiona, whenever a Christian tells you, or wherever even in your mind think irreconcilable differences, Colin will never change. Irreconcilable differences. What must be the thought that comes to your mind? Don't cook for him? No. What's the thought? What is the thought that will be in your mind? I find it so difficult to live with him. Think of what Christ has done for you. We, regardless of willful distortion, cannot solve. The reason is we keep thinking there is an option. Now, if you read this, there's an option means we will just find ways to divorce, right? There should be not an option at all. It's so taught badly, it's so badly taught in churches that Christians begin to think there are reasons for divorce, when Christ said there are none. When you make it so clear, they say, I don't want to get married anymore. Right? So there are none. So I cannot agree with this. But is there biblical guidelines in the case of, you're asked those questions. Married, believer, unbeliever, divorce, want to divorce. If divorce will happen, there are. Now I ask you, so question number 4, can you answer? No, I disagree, right? I hope you disagree. Why? Because very simply, Christ said there are never any grounds and reasons for divorce. Okay, now next. Point number 5. What are the principles? All your questions. When divorce has happened to believers. Now I'm going to ask you, actually from the principles you learn, you know already. Douglas said 2 believers never understood. Never came for WCF, never read WCF. Read WCF still wrong. Don't read. They read WCF and they ended up divorcing, okay? And then they suddenly realize, actually it's wrong. We should not have divorced, but they're divorced already. All right? Or they are at the state of divorce. And the other party don't want to reconcile. What should they do? These are both Christians, listen carefully. These are both Christians. By the time they came to church, they are divorced already. What should you advise them? Forgive one another and be reconciled. And they say, but the wife doesn't want to reconcile. Go look for pastor. Yes, I know. Then pastor will turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 7 with you present. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Can we read verse 10 and 11 together? Quick. 1 Corinthians 7, 10 to 11. And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Let not the wife depart from her husband. But, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife. Understand this principle, huh? Look carefully here. Now this part, the Apostle Paul is talking about two married believers who for some reason ended up divorced. The instruction from Scripture is this. You meet two Christians are divorced for whatever reason. Number one, they are not supposed to marry another. Correct? You read, right? Not to marry. Douglas, why? Why must you tell them you cannot marry another person when you're divorced? Even though you're divorced. Why?
So that there's a chance or opportunity for them to be reconciled.
So there is a chance or opportunity to be reconciled. That's one. But more important, there is a reason. If you remarry, will you sin? Cheryl, what happens when Christians get divorced and they're both alive and they remarry? What happens? What does God call them? Adulterers. Christians who choose to divorce, you must be clear in your mind. God says you cannot remarry. You remarry, you are called, in the eyes of God, you have committed adultery and fornication. Correct? We read that many times. Understand that. So you must tell them, if you remarry, you commit fornication and adultery, although you are divorced. God still considers that adultery and fornication because you are one flesh still. Unless the husband died. And don't think of trying to kill him. Now, when you come down here, and it says, and yes.
What happens if there was a Christian couple and then they both divorced and then they both remarried, but only later on they realize that there's
Okay, we'll come to that after. What happened if a Christian couple get divorced, they didn't realize, then they got married? What should they do? Okay? Oh no, we committed adultery. Better divorce, then second divorce and quickly marry back. No, alright, we'll talk about that. We have Bible verses. God has all the answers for this. If you allow me to continue. Now, number one, don't marry. You must know. Tell them, don't marry. And you yourself make sure. Don't ever think of getting divorced so that you can remarry. In God's eyes, you're adultery. God will deal with you. Number two is, we read, and let them be reconciled. Let them be reconciled. Always seek reconciliation. Now look at the verse. Let them remain unmarried or be reconciled. What is God saying? God is saying, now, if you get divorced and you feel, I really like married life, and I really miss marriage, and I want to get married. What does God say? Go find your divorced partner. Marry back the same person. Understand? If not, remain unmarried. If you like marriage, then reconcile. Don't marry someone else. Can you understand? Don't marry someone else. Be reconciled if you like marriage so much. Find back the same person. Okay, so that is the advice. And Douglas is right. Now the moment you get married, what happened? We see afterwards. Now that's a believer, huh? So yes.
Here there was used the word depart, it's not divorce. So is it different? So is here talking about separation or divorce?
Separation or divorce. Even they say, now we are living apart to sort things out. Alright? But I don't think it's referring to separation. Because Paul won't give the injunction, while you're living in separation, remain unmarried. Of course. Do you understand? When he says remain unmarried, means the divorce has occurred. He definitely won't say if you're separated for the time being, don't marry someone else. Definitely not that, right? So it's likely about divorce. Now, what happens in the case? Now here, this is a believer. This is an unbeliever. Two unbelievers got married, one became a believer. Okay? One became a believer. In this case, the believer wants to leave. What do? Let's read verses 10 to 16. Can we read quickly and assimilate quickly? Verse 13 to 16. Reading. And the woman which hath a husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. But if the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. But, verse 15, let's read together verse 15. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us to peace. Verse 16, for what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? All right, what is God saying here? Now, this is a case where there's a believer and there's an unbeliever. The unbelieving spouse says, I don't like Christians. I hate Christians. I want to divorce. What should you say to the person? Ben. Unbelieving spouse says, I cannot stand Christians. I hate Christians. I want to get divorced. Yeah, hurry up, get divorced. Now's your chance. What will you say to the person?
So what will I say to this person?
Yes. Yes.
They are unbelievers.
Yes.
Or one believer and one unbeliever.
One believer and one unbeliever. The unbeliever said, I cannot stand Christian, I want to divorce you.
Based on what Corinthians 17,
Let him depart. Straight away, okay, you want to divorce her. Okay? Let's sign here.
but still, you have, like what you say, you have to forgive for reconciliation.
Yes. You try. Try to keep the marriage. Now, if they want to stay, okay, verse 13 is very clear. If the unbelieving say, okay lah, I'm alright lah. You want to be Christian, I'm okay. Alright? And say, I'm happy to stay together married. Definitely stay together. Now, if the person insists on leaving, because of the principle of verse 13, alright? Verse 14. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife. What is this saying? There is an opportunity for, as long as you stay married, the Christian wife have a very great opportunity to continue to preach the gospel to the husband. Right? Continue to give him the truth because they live together under the same roof all the time. So he said that is the best thing. Even if you want to leave, you try your best to retain him. Okay? Because you can sanctify him. If you divorce, then very little chance for him to hear the gospel anymore. But if he insists, verse 15, insists, then yes, you can let him depart, which is same verb, I guess. Depart, so ilhua, that will be about divorce. Now, then say you're not under bondage in such case. But God has called us to peace. Can you look at verse 15? But God has called us to peace. God is still saying, now if the unbelieving husband insists on leaving, yes, you're not under bondage in such a case, but God had called us to peace means what? But please remember, God really wants the marriage to be peaceful, to be together, to be in bond. Okay? So don't jump to the first conclusion, your husband not Christian. He want to get divorced. Divorce lah, hurry up lah. You know what you're waiting for? No, the advice is always, the husband is sanctified by the wife. God has called us to peace. You try. You be a good wife. Alright? You be the Christian wife and see what happens. But if still insists that they depart, still insist they depart. Okay. Now, you are a believer alone. Your unbelieving spouse divorced you. Can you as a lone believer remarry? Can or not? Okay. Adrian say no. Why no? When you look here, why no?
Because it says you still have the chance to win the person to come to Christ.
Very, very good. Look at verse 17, verse 16. Verse 16. Now, verse 15 said, now, the brother or sister is not under bondage. But did he ask you to get remarried? He didn't say. He just said you're not under the bondage of marriage. When the person wants to divorce, you are not bound to say you cannot break that bond. You can, in this case, the person wants to leave, that bond can be broken. Not ideal, but look at verse 16. Let's read verse 16 together. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband, or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? What is God saying? God is saying, your unbelieving spouse depart. You can get married or not. Paul is quite silent about this. But Paul said this, God said this after that. Hey, hello, believer, how would you know? Now, if you go and get married to someone, your chance of remarrying is over, no? Right? But how would you not know that your unbelieving spouse, who you want very much, not to divorce you, how would you know that one day he or she would come to know Christ? Right? And when he or she come to know Christ, do you realize that you can come back together again? There is that chance. That's why God is very wise. He remains silent. He doesn't give clear instruction. This one, clear instruction, cannot remarry. Believer and believer cannot remarry. It's called adultery. Believer and unbeliever, God just simply says this. Try not to remarry. How do you know that this person won't one day become a Christian? That is verse 16. Understand that? So answer your question, Benedict. God says...
Can you say that last part again?
Which part?
Like you said, that one's a believer.
Okay, believer case, look at verse. Believer case, look at verse. Verse 12. Okay. No, look at verse 13. Sorry, my spectacles. Look at verse 11. 11 refers to two believers. Understand that? Two believers, if you get, for one reason, you're divorced, you're not supposed to get married. You're supposed to remain unmarried. Okay? If you remarry, adultery. If you want marriage, go back to the same person. Then he deals with, after that he deals with a believer and an unbeliever. In the believer and unbeliever case, he did not say cannot get remarried. He just say the bond, you're not under the marriage bond. But he didn't say you cannot, you should then therefore go remarry. He want to depart the marriage bond, you're not under that bond. How do you know not that one day she might get saved? Okay, but once you remarry, you can't marry her again, which we are going to see afterwards. Okay? No. Okay, look for me afterwards. Anyone? Yes?
In that case then, so the unbeliever then marries someone else.
Okay. 5C, that's the next question. So when the spouse has remarried, how? When the spouse has remarried, what can you do? When the spouse has remarried, you can marry, whether it's this case or this case. How do we know that? Deuteronomy chapter 24, please. We're not going to finish. Deuteronomy chapter 24. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 24, shall we read? Verse 4, I think. Now, verse 3 and 4, shall we read verse 3 and 4 together? And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorce, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of the house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for there is abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So what God is saying, the law has always been this. If two persons ends up in a divorce, and the spouse, say for example the wife marries another man, okay? You cannot remarry her. You're not allowed to. Even if the husband died, she has remarried, you also cannot marry her. Clear? Clear, very simple, right? Hey, why you're staring? I need you to understand this because it's linked to the other. Two persons got divorced. God says if the woman, for example, marries another man, then decides to divorce him and wants to come back to you, God says you cannot marry her already. She has remarried already. It's defilement, okay? Even if the husband dies and she come back to you, also cannot. She has remarried, okay? So in the case of remarriage, if two persons, whether it's two Christians or a Christian and a non-Christian, in the case of divorce, which should not be, but if it happens, as long as the other party gets married to another person, you cannot remarry this person anymore, correct? Which means you then, therefore, the inference is that you are now free to marry Now, because you cannot reconcile it, there's no reconciliation. The reason why God always say, stay unmarried is, like Douglas reminds us, the purpose is reconciliation. Once someone else gets married, reconciliation is gone. Understand that? Reconciliation is gone. That's why don't remarry, besides the fact that you're committing adultery. Okay? There is a double adultery. Double adultery. So God says no. Cannot. Fiona, alright? Okay. Okay, so I just answered the question. Now, next one, very quickly. Point number 6. Question number 6. They're supposed to end in 5 minutes, which I don't think we can. Should a person become a Christian in marriage, seek divorce? I answered this already. So question number 6, completely answered. Okay, should a person become a Christian in a marriage and the other party seek divorce on the grounds of unequal yoke? Alright, this one someone asked me. Now, if... What was the person's question? The person's question is this. If you become a Christian in a marriage and your wife is not a Christian, her flatmate argue with her, you must divorce because of thou shalt not be unequally yoked. Because God says you must not be unequally yoked, you must not marry unbeliever. Therefore, if you become a Christian and your husband is not a Christian, you must divorce. Otherwise, you're unequally yoked. Do you agree, Benedict? When we all become a Christian? Are you? No, and the person don't want to become a Christian. So the person says, as long as the other person don't want to be a Christian, you must divorce. Otherwise, it's called unequal yoke.
So if they give a letter of divorcement to them, the Christian, can they just, are they obeying God if they just don't sign it? Are they obeying God as long as they don't? Because the other one wants to divorce already, right?
Okay, maybe I ask Ben, right? Maybe I ask, I'm not sure exactly what I'm saying, but for lifetime, Ben, is it unequal yoke? Unequal yoke is, God said, before you get married, you do not marry an unbeliever. Understand that? Okay, if you become a believer, it is not called unequal yoke. You did not choose it. Then, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, try to win the husband to Christ. The husband want to depart, try to persuade. You can sanctify him. If really want to leave, you are not under the bond of marriage, but remain single. Hopefully can reconcile. Okay? Now next, question number 7. When there are irreconcilable differences. Now the book here say irreconcilable differences okay for divorce. No, it is not. Agree? It is not. It's the irreconcilable differences. Today we call it irreconcilable differences. In Moses' time they call it what, Vincent? It's called hardness of heart. Today it's called irreconcilable differences. Your heart is just hardened. I don't want to reconcile. Back then it's called hardness of heart. It's the same thing. Now, what happened when there is physical abuse? All right, Young's question. What happened? Ask another person. Eugene, what happened? Your Christian friend who's a woman, married to another Christian man, and there's physical abuse. He beats her up. They said, Eugene, I really cannot take it. And it's not safe. He wants divorce, and if I don't divorce, he beats up my children, he beats me up. What would you advise?
I think that one, first of all, that's the problem of the abuse. There's an issue to report. Yes.
All right, so there's an abuse, there's a need to report to the police. Okay, for example. Or, now one thing is inform church, if they're believers especially. Then the pastor and the church leaders step in to counsel the person. Right, to counsel the person. The first step is never divorce, understand that. Counsel the person. But there is danger to the person physically. How, Eugene? So report to police, right? Anyway, these cases you have to tell police. The church will tell police. All right, so husbands know this. If you abuse your wife, if we find out, I will tell the police. All right? We are bound by law also, I think. Now, so the police come, what does the police say? You better stop and give warning, right? If not, we'll jail you. Right? We'll put you in jail. Especially even like parents abuse children. Put you in jail. Put in jail, do you divorce the person? No, the person go to jail. I have a jail husband, that's it. Now, the other thing to advise is, should you advise separation? I use the word separation, not divorce. Huh? Sometimes there is a need for physical separation, for physical safety for a period. Understand that? Then the church will step in and try to counsel and help the man. If he's a true Christian, he will repent, he will change, right? So sometimes there is a need for, not divorce, physical separation for safety. Even the police will have restraining order for a period and all that. Okay, so some of these things are practical things we do first. Not sure, say, divorce, the guy beat you, divorce. It is, I know it is very difficult. But do you believe, if God say he doesn't want divorce, do you believe that God can help you? You must believe that. Alright? Should not be the first option. It may be a long and very painful, long process. It may be that, yes. Sometimes in that case, because court will have to issue restraining order and all that. Yeah, but not to go to court to divorce. Understand that? Not go to court to sue him for beating you up for money. That kind of thing, that's wrong. Alright, sometimes they need to step in to help you, protect you. So sometimes these are long and difficult, prolonged counseling and handling. So it's not first option. So Yong, does it answer your question? So the abuse of a child and all that, the first option is not divorce, is figure out how to fix the safety first. Then how to fix the second part, the spiritual repentance and reconciliation. Yes. Okay.
The innocent party doesn't want divorce. It's the other party who wants divorce.
Okay, so they beat you up, they want divorce.
And there's no way you can do it. They sign the paper.
There's nothing you can do, they sign and they want to divorce. Now in those cases, they really want to move out, there's nothing you can do, then they will leave, right? They will leave. So the question is, Christian, abuse, don't want to repent, still abusive, insist on divorce. But the word divorce law, if one person wants to divorce, you must divorce.
After a certain years, you divorce automatically.
Automatically dissolve. Is it the person submit the paper, after certain years it dissolve? Yes, Risa.
Someone, the life is in danger. So, God's mercy.
Someone's life is in danger, God's mercy. This is on video. Alright? I say it very clearly and listen very clearly. I'm not saying that the life is in danger, no divorce means you stay together under the same roof and you sort it out yourself. Close the door, lock the door, please sort it out yourself. When there's danger, I repeatedly say, there even may be need for legal people to step in for physical protection. Alright? Remember? So when there's physical danger, the first thing to do is fix the physical danger. We must protect the person. Not by divorce. Sometimes by physical separation. Okay? Then the next step we do is at the same time fix the spiritual problem. Okay? Is that your question? Yes. So always we will step in and quickly fix the physical safety. Same for children, same for adults. Physical safety, fix that first. Then at the same time fix the spiritual problem. Alright, understand? Okay? So now, Yong's question. So the person abusive insists on divorce. After some years, it dissolves, then it's not your fault. So my question is this, then should this woman remarry? Yes, this person, the Bible says, you don't commit adultery. You stay. Now it's very painful, right? That is possible for reconciliation. Unless the person marries someone else, then you're free to remarry. Okay? Alright? Now, singles, listen carefully. I don't have time to cover that. Maybe next round. Now, singles, do you understand marriage bond is not breakable? Those of you who are thinking of marriage, you better be prepared for all this. Number one. Number two, you know how difficult and how bad it can be if you marry the wrong person? I repeat, do you know how bad it's going to be? So parents teach your children, teach them this. Do you know how bad it's going to be when you marry the wrong person? Your life will be turned upside down, and yet you know that you still want to obey God and stay single. How difficult that be? Please don't rush into marriage just to get married. Alright, that's my point. Now, so I covered that. Now, number 8. Okay, good. That's for the next lesson, which is not so good. I hope to finish tonight. Alright, so some of this technical understanding, it must settle in your heart. Married people, don't even ever think of divorce, no matter how difficult. And all the details about can marry, remarry, and all that is all in scriptures. Please don't have the wrong idea.
Let us pray.
话语词的。
Now, someone asked what is the difference between psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.
有人说诗章、颂词、灵歌有什么不同？
Someone also asked, can we just have instrumental music?
有人说我们只要乐器的音乐就行就好。
Can we
可以吗
worship God with instrumental music?
我们单单用乐器的音乐来敬拜神就好，可以吗？